Over the years, opinions have changed on the Halloween franchise and on certain movies in the series as a whole, and that's been really interesting to me as somebody that's been a fan since I was a kid. So today I wanted to kind of recap the history of the Halloween franchise and share some of my thoughts. What's up, everybody? It's Nick here from the Lost River Drive-In, and as you can tell by the intro and the title of this video, this is about Halloween. Halloween is my bread and butter, so if you are new to my channel and you like Halloween, please subscribe because you're going to get plenty of that content here. Now, looking at the Halloween franchise as a whole has always been really interesting to me. Because in 1978, when the original Halloween came out, it didn't initially blow up. It took a while for people to kind of catch on to it, and the original reviews were not that positive. But before you knew it, Halloween was an overnight success, and people from all over the country were talking about it. My mom, who lived through it, told me about how it was. It just kind of burst onto the scene one day. I don't know if people's minds changed or if there was one specific review that really got everybody wanting to see it. I remember John Carpenter mentioning the Village Voice review, and I think that is really where it started to turn. Now, of course, going into the 80s, that's when the slasher craze really picked up. Halloween 2 would come out in the beginning of the 1980s, and most people liked Halloween 2. Critics were a little more lukewarm on it, but it was pretty middling at best by critics, but fans seemed to like it. It followed a lot of the formula of the first movie, just added kind of more gore and more of what you expected from the 1980s. But where the franchise really took its turn was Halloween 3, Season of the Witch in 1982. And that's a fascinating time because this was the first time that any of these major franchises, mainly because Friday had just started and Nightmare hadn't even begun yet, had really stepped out of its comfort zone. Now, it wasn't the first attempt at building like an anthology story out of a franchise or whatever, but to use the name, to market it as such, and to kind of dupe people was an interesting tact, to say the least. Now this, interestingly, is where my mom turned on the franchise. Having seen the first and second one in theaters and loving both of them, she was naturally there for opening weekend of Halloween 3 in '82, and her and her friends that she went and saw it with hated the movie, and from that point forward had no interest in Halloween. Didn't see 4, 5, none of them, until years later on cable and whatnot. And that can kind of color your opinion moving forward about the franchise. And it did with her. I remember being a teenager and, collecting these movies and talking about them ad nauseum, and her going, "Oh no, that's so dumb. These movies sucked after the second one. The third one's where it really went downhill." And over the years, having shown her some of these and going, "Okay, that was actually pretty good. That wasn't bad." But that was when it really changed. See, in the 1980s, it is no secret at all that Jason and Freddy ruled the decade. They just did. Part of that is because after the failure of Halloween 3 and the backlash to it, Michael Myers would remain dormant for 6 years. There was no movement on another movie. There was talks here and there, but nothing ever really materialized. And because of that, the two new icons were really able to kind of take the lead and be the guys at the time. Now enter Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers in 1988. And yes, it was #1 at the box office, but there's a lot of revisionist history done with this movie. This movie's box office totals paled in comparison to anything that Jason and Freddy were doing in the 80s. Halloween 4 was a big way to bring Michael Myers back, but it never really made the splash that I think they were hoping it would. Now, it was still profitable enough and made fans happy enough that a new film was quickly greenlit, and we got Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. Now, as somebody that loves that film, and you guys know that about me, warts and all, it is unmistakable that it was completely rushed. They were rewriting the script while they were shooting it. The director, Dominique Athéna-Girard, was changing things on set right before they went before camera. What if we said this? What if we did this? Halloween 5 was a movie that was made heavily based off of vibes. And I love that at times about it. I really love the kind of uniqueness to Halloween 5. But it's undeniable that the movie was really kind of just, no, let's just point and shoot and we'll see what we get. I ended up happy with it, but Halloween 5 pretty much tanked. Just as quickly as Michael Myers was back, it looked like he was on his way out again. Halloween 5 made around $11 million in 1989, and to put that in perspective, A Nightmare on Elm Street: The Dream Child made 3 times that. And that movie, to New Line Cinema, looked like, oh, this is going to be the end of Freddy Krueger. That's to kind of put in perspective the low point that Michael Myers was at. Now we get into the mid-90s, 1995, and we have Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers. And Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers, just like Halloween 5 and Halloween 4, believe it or not, did not do all that well at the box office. It really didn't. It made a little over $10 million. It didn't really make waves. The troubled production with Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers was a big reason for why there was not really much interest about it, not good word of mouth. It was kind of just a hack job put together. We would find out all about what happened behind the scenes with that movie, and now we can see the producer's cut in its beautiful restored glory. But the movie was just all over the place. That was a movie that was simply put out to try to make some money off a property they had. I mean, looking back at Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers, although I love it, there wasn't a lot of love and ambition there with the filmmakers. I'll give credit to Daniel Farrens. He was a fan. He really wanted to tie a lot of these things together. And I think it actually turned out a really solid film. And I am unashamed to love Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers. But it's undeniable that this was just another nail in the coffin. 6 years after Halloween 5 looked like it was going to kill the franchise, at least for the time being, Halloween 6 did not resuscitate it at all. And the only thing that could resuscitate it in 1998 was Halloween H2O. Now, mind you, again, in the 90s, the Friday movies and Nightmare movies that were coming out did better than all the Halloween movies from the late 80s and early 90s. Like, it's just the way it was. Michael Myers missing his chance in the 80s after Halloween 3 is the reason why it took a while for him to get the status that he did. Freddy and Jason earned that within their first decade. Michael Myers didn't. Sure, the first film and the second film were well received and made a lot of money, but you can't lay dormant for 10 years and expect to be the king, so to speak. As we all know with Halloween H2O, Jamie Lee Curtis, John Carpenter, Deborah Hill, everybody that was involved with the first movie really wanted to come back and do something again. They wanted to do an anniversary movie. Now you could say it was for cynical reasons. Oh, they wanted money, they wanted notoriety, whatever it is, but they wanted to come back and do it. They wanted to make a sequel to Halloween 2. And everybody was on board until John Carpenter wanted a lot of money for it, and they were like, no. So he said, screw it. But Halloween H2O came anyway. Jamie Lee Curtis gave, in my opinion, what is probably her best performance as Laurie Strode in the series, in the movie. And it kind of revitalized it for a new generation. It played a lot off of Scream, and at some times, that's to the movie's detriment. But the filmmakers knew what they were doing because that's what was popular at the time. And Halloween H2O was a massive commercial success, and it was actually met pretty decently well by critics. So Halloween seemed to be alive again. And because of that, they had to rush Halloween Resurrection. And Halloween Resurrection is a simple case of we need to strike while the iron's hot and make more money. They didn't really have a solid concrete idea for the movie. There was no real motivation behind making this movie at all except for money. You bring Jamie Lee back for the opening sequence simply because she was contractually obligated to, which she tried to get out of. She did not want to come back for this movie, but she had to. You kill her off at the beginning, which left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. And then you're kind of doing this reality TV show on the internet because that's what was popular at the time. Oh, the birth of the internet, reality TV, and hip-hop stars and everything like that. So Resurrection just kind of wanted to incorporate all of that. Now, I will say at the time it was a little cutting edge to do what they did with like the head cameras and everything like that. That was honestly not a terrible idea. It was just really poorly executed. The movie lacks any suspense, any fear, any terror. It's just not a good time. And I know a lot of people say, well, it's dumb fun. And there are moments of it that are fun. But I feel like I'm laughing at the movie, not with the movie. But Halloween Resurrection, although it didn't do nearly as well as H2O, it still made like 3 times its budget back. So Halloween was definitely in a better place. But I would say that's because horror was in a better place at that time. Having said that, though, Resurrection was absolutely lambasted by critics and fans alike. So the franchise lay dormant again for a half decade. Until Rob Zombie came and took the reins. And we know the history of the zombie era. With Halloween and Halloween 2, Halloween was the largest Labor Day opening weekend ever for well over a decade until it was dethroned by Shang-Chi, I believe. Halloween 2, while not making as much as Halloween, it still made like 3.5 times its budget back. His 2 movies brought in over $100 million with the property. It was viable. It definitely was viable, especially after his first movie. Here's the problem though. Rob Zombie decided to do his own thing with Halloween 2. Now, I don't think that's a problem creatively, because Halloween 2 is my second favorite Halloween film after the original. I absolutely adore that movie. But just like we've seen so many times throughout this franchise's history, taking a big creative swing like that is the reason why interest dwindled for the property. Halloween 5 did it. Halloween 3 did it. Halloween 6 did it. Halloween Resurrection took a big swing, but it wasn't really creative. And what is the common theme after all of those movies? A long break before the next movie, because it soured a lot of people on it. I will never be ashamed or be upset at Rob Zombie for doing what he did with Halloween 2. I love that film. I will always love that film. I think it is genuinely a masterpiece. And I know somebody's commenting right now like, how dare you throw that word out? Whatever. But he left the franchise and the fan base kind of in shambles a little. And then David Gordon Green enters the fold, and he brings Jamie Lee Curtis with him, and Nick Castle, and John Carpenter to compose, and everybody is excited again. And it was the right time, you know, we were right in the thick of this requel craze. It was really starting, and Halloween 2018 was the one that really brought it to the limelight. You had a lot of the original players back. The marketing campaign was great, and it basically told people, forget about everything except that first movie. You don't have to see any of those other sequels. And a lot of normal casual horror fans were like, cool, because I've only seen the first movie, or I only remember the first movie. And because of that, the movie, it was huge. Highest grossing R-rated slasher film of all time. It made over $250 million at the worldwide box office. It exceeded my expectations. And most fans were happy, and critics really dug the movie. So we got a trilogy. And each one of the films in the trilogy made over $100 million worldwide at the box office. And as they went on, the reviews got worse and worse, sure, and it divided the fan base, but Halloween had never been more popular. So that is kind of the history of the movies, the franchise as a whole. Now, I made this video to simply talk about a few things quickly after I recapped all of that. First of all being, Michael Myers in my mind is the king. I think he is the king of the big three. Now, again, it is just opinion. It is about what you prefer. But I have to concede, Michael didn't get that status till much later. Now, maybe you could say that he was playing the long game and, oh, that makes it all that more impressive. But I don't think that's the case. I think a lot of poor marketing, a lot of poor decisions and rushing films into production without finished scripts, and kind of swinging for the fences at times that maybe they shouldn't have, led to Michael Myers taking the long way to the top. Freddy and Jason, they knew what they did best at the beginning, and those filmmakers and those creative teams really gave you a double, triple, and quadruple dose of that. Michael Myers did play the long game. It wasn't until the 2000s when he really took center stage. Now, Halloween 1978 was always going to cast a bigger shadow than Friday the 13th or A Nightmare on Elm Street. That is just a fact. Most people revere that film over those other two films. But the franchises as a whole, it was no question at that point, those two were far better. There was just more there, more of what the franchise did best, and they were alive and well while Michael was on life support multiple times. And then to the point that I mentioned at the beginning about a lot of revisionist history done with the Halloween franchise that as a fan kind of irks me at times. You know, I talked to Christian about this, I talked to my buddy Justin about this, and it's cool to see people come around to movies. It really is. It's cool to see people give some time and take a step back and come back to a movie and you go, you know what? That was a lot better than I remembered. I've done it myself. But with Halloween, I'm really protective over this series because I'm a borderline obsessive, and that's fine. So when people are coming around now to Halloween 3, and it's really been happening over the last decade, it's cool, but at the same time, it irks me. Because I remember posting videos and stuff on social media 10 years ago about Halloween 3, and people saying, oh, it's not a Halloween movie. Or watching videos of people's Halloween collections 15 years ago, and them saying, here's my Halloween collection, but I don't have Halloween 3 because it doesn't have Michael Myers. It's not a Halloween movie. And that would drive me up a frickin' wall. Because it is. It is in the franchise. It's made by the same people. It is the third movie. You can't go from 2 to 4. Does it fit canonically with the series? Not really. No, not at all. But it doesn't matter. It's part of the series. Because if they had it their way and that movie had done well and been received well, that was going to be the direction Halloween took, at least for a while. They were going to do anthology movies. So it's cool to see people come around to it. But it is crazy at the same time and a bit maddening to see people really loving this movie now when they were the very ones trashing it years and years ago. And kind of the same can be said for Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. I've noticed that recently too. And I'll post something about it on social media because I do that a lot. And people will say, I really hope this movie gets the love it deserves one day. And while I do too, at the same time, it's almost like that, keep that same energy. Keep that same energy mindset. Like, oh, this is terrible. This is the worst piece of shit you've ever seen. Keep that same energy. Because 15 years later, it is nice to see people come out of the woodwork and say, hey, I watched it one time when it came out and I wasn't a fan, but I actually kind of dig this movie. I can respect that approach. But it's just weird. It's definitely weird. Now, that's not to say that if you're someone that took a while to warm up to it, there's anything wrong with that. There's not. I meet those people in my comments all the time. What I have a problem with is the people that lambasted the movie, raked it over the coals, attacked Rob Zombie and his wife on Halloween message boards and all over social media, and are now coming around to it. That's what I can't stand. We grow as people, and time changes us, and that's fine. But I don't think I could ever be so vitriolic to a film like that and the people that made the film, and then just flip on a dime and go, I love it now. Yay! I don't know. It's weird. Like I said, keep that same energy. And then obviously you hear a lot of people say that about Halloween Ends. They hope that is a movie like Halloween 3 and recently Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 that starts to grow in appreciation as the years go on. And while part of me says that would be really cool, at the same time, like with Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, having lived through that and seen what the internet was like when that movie came out, I saw it with Ends as well. I saw all these people. I saw the things they said to me, to others on social media about the film, about the filmmakers. It's like, I don't know. I don't know if you can do an about face with that one. And what's the point of me mentioning these things? It's that I feel like every long-running franchise has this. They have these films that people have these epiphanies on or that grow in appreciation or depreciate as time goes on. But I feel like, even as a Halloween fan, it makes Halloween seem bigger than it was at the time, or more important than it was at the time. I have to be honest here. I have to be totally unbiased and say Halloween 3 was not popular at the time. A lot of people love it now, but that movie killed the franchise for over half a decade. Halloween 5 was not popular at the time. Same thing, killed the franchise for over half a decade. A lot of people coming around to it now, but still, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, not popular at the time. Killed the franchise for half a decade. But more people coming around to it now. And maybe you're going to be able to say the same thing about Halloween Ends. Who knows how long it'll be before we get the next movie. And that argument could be made for that film too. Whether you love it or hate it. That was the point of talking about the revisionist history at times with the Halloween franchise. Because it almost makes you see it in a light that, oh my gosh, this has always just been such a big deal. And there's so many revered movies in this series. Guys, it was not always like that. It was not always like that. And if you're like Gen Z or younger and you didn't live through some of those eras, consider yourself lucky because you've only been able to see more often than not positivity around Halloween, aside from Ends. But, I lived through a couple different iterations of Halloween and I saw the backlash and I saw all of that. And it's just kind of crazy to me that Michael really has this persona and this mystique amongst horror fans, but it took a really long time for him to get that. And I don't even really know what the point was. Maybe it was Halloween H2O. Maybe it was Rob Zombie's Halloween. I don't know when that point was, but it is crazy to look back on. What was the point of this video? Well, the point of this video was, believe it or not, to be kind of critical about the Halloween franchise. And some of the installments and some of the handling of the series and some of the way that it's looked at in history. Looking back on it in such high regard when that was not always the case. As a fan of the franchise, I'm very protective over it. I'm also very honest with myself about it. I can say that I love a movie in the series, but understand that it was to the series' detriment at the time. And it's crazy because I get in these moods where I really want to talk about Halloween, where Halloween is like at the forefront of my mind. And as you can tell by this video, I'm in one of those moods. But when I do that, I often go down a rabbit hole and I think about certain things and I think about, But it wasn't always this way. Or when did this change? Or why is that the way it is now? Or why do we hold this in high regard and not this? So I guess this was more just kind of a rambling session about the history of the Halloween franchise, the revisionist history about the Halloween franchise, and how Michael Myers played the long game to become the king. But I want to know what you guys have to say down below. Please comment in the comment section, discuss it all with me, discuss your experiences, discuss some of the movies in the franchise you may be warmed up to. Because as I said, there's nothing wrong with that at all. The problem is when it's disingenuous, when you're jumping on a bandwagon to save face because years ago you wanted to harm people involved with making a certain movie. That's where it's a problem. But if that's the case for you, comment down below and let me know. As long as you're commenting, as long as you're watching, I'm enjoying having the conversation. So thank you guys so much for watching. This is Nick at the Lost River Drive-In, and I'm pulling out.